on paper, I had everything going for me in my career, but I just in my gut knew that there was more I needed to do for myself.
Karlie, thank you so much for joining. It's really good to see you, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Of course, I'm honored to be a part of the conversation. Thanks for thinking of me, Dylan.
Absolutely. We'll just introduce Karlie for those who don't know her. Karlie first became known as a model, and she's got an incredible curiosity, but she's also appeared on over 40 international covers. And in 2015, she actually went back to school to NYU's Gallatin School, and then later founded an organization that I think is really cool called Kode with Klossy. And so we're going to touch on a lot of the different aspects of that here. But yeah, maybe to start off, Karlie, if you could tell us a bit about your educational journey and sort of like, were you a good student in school, and where to start and stop and start again, and how'd that go?
Absolutely. You know, Dylan, I'm curious if you relate, but I've always identified as a lifelong learner. I'm somebody who, from as early as I can remember, has always loved asking questions and learning about the world around me, and specifically science has always been a real passion of mine. My dad's an emergency room doctor, and as long as I can remember, that was always kind of my dream, to follow in the footsteps of my dad. And, you know, he just always seemed like this just wealth of knowledge that no matter what question, as big of a question I could come up with, he always had some sort of answer, or better yet, he would send me on, you know, that journey of continuing to seek out bigger answers or dive deeper. And I think because of that early kind of exposure to just critical thinking and asking questions and curiosity, it set me up for being a lifelong learner. And so my educational journey has been, I would say, non-linear, in the sense that, you know, I had set my heart on becoming a doctor and pursuing that path of pre-med, and then medical school, and residency, which is a very, very long, and I have so much respect for those who do pursue that path. But when I was in high school, the same exact week that I started my freshman year of high school, I started my career. Wow. I started, a pretty fast-paced, high fashion, high intensity career in the world of fashion. And I started high school on a Monday, and by Friday I was walking in a New York Fashion Week runway show for Calvin Klein.
What?
And and so I'd say—
I knew it happened fast, but I didn't realize it was that fast, and also not during the first week of high school. That's pretty out there.
Totally. I was like still finding my locker, much less like, you know, getting used to high school and just finding my way around the school. Meanwhile, I simultaneously started a pretty fast-paced full-time job. And because of that, the 4 years of my high school education, I kind of had this juggling act of being a part-time student, and I would go into my high school and I would take classes online. I would take classes in person with my peers and do kind of independent studies. And then I would part-time be traveling the world and flying to Paris for, you know, Couture Fashion Week, and walking in, you know, Dior Couture shows, and traveling to Tokyo and Moscow, and had an apartment in New York, and kind of lived this double life between, you know, St. Louis, my hometown, and my high school, and the rest of the world. And because of that, I kind of had this exposure to experiential learning, and learning in a different way than just being in the classroom. And that I found deeply impactful and enriching. And so when I graduated high school and kind of was at this critical moment, both in my career and in my life, of kind of deciding, okay, this career of being a model in a high fashion industry was not what I planned on. With, you know, I was, you know, and I kind of had to make this decision of, okay, do I go to school and kind of just say, okay, that was a cool career, it was fun while it lasted, now I'm going to get back to my studies. And meanwhile, I was graduating high school top of my class with honor.
Wait, let's pause there for a second. How did you balance high school and your career, like how much energy were you putting towards both?
I was putting so much energy into both. You know, I would be flying on a plane from Paris back to St. Louis doing, you know, cramming for a chemistry test or studying, you know, French. And what was really cool is I would be studying French out of my textbook and you know, talking through vocabulary that I was then directly using when I would, you know, be in Paris and be negotiating prices for a croissant or something.
You were deciding if you're going to go to college or go full on your career, and how did you make that decision, and what was sort of the framework that you used at the time?
So I took my studies really seriously, so I would have the option to really, you know, choose by the time I graduate high school. I want to make sure that I have both paths open to me to be able to graduate top of my class so that I can get into a top university. There's not just one path in life. I don't know. I've realized there's many more than one paths in life. And then by the time I graduated high school, I could have never imagined that my career would continue to really flourish and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so by the time, you know, my senior year came around, I was really on the fence about what to do. But in my gut, I knew I can always go back to school. I can always pursue, you know, my academic dreams and this time-sensitive opportunity of continuing to chase my career, which it just felt like the more I put into it, the more I was getting out of it. And I remember kind of having a conversation with my dad of just talking it through. You know, my dad is somebody, like I said, who's always super kind of influential in my life, and I didn't want to let him down.
Yep.
And I have, you know, amazing teachers in my life. I didn't want to let them down. And I talked through, you know, this conversation with the people that I would consider, you know, my mentors at that time, my teachers, my parents, and weighed out the pros and cons. And they were all extremely supportive of me pursuing my career. And I put college on hold, but I did take all the SAT, ACTs, you know, to make sure in case I pivot and want to go back to university, that's still available, which I did end up doing a few years later. I applied to NYU. So anyway, I feel like I'm talking at you in circles, but
it's so interesting because it's what you described is so parallel to my journey of dropping out of college. In terms of like, it was a decision that I weighed heavily. I had this exact same thought around school will always be there. Kind of interesting in our times. I'm like, okay, maybe it's not always there. But and then I also like put a lot of weight on my parents' decisions as well, and my parents sort of like how they saw it. And that was really important to me. But I thought like, this is a unique opportunity and I have to do it now. Like this can't wait. Fast forwarding a few years, your career is still going incredibly strong at that point, but you made the decision to go to NYU. Why then? And what was sort of the thinking there?
So I really was craving being back in a traditional learning environment. And you know, it's funny because a lot of people were kind of confused by my decision. They were, you know, they were thinking and they were saying to me, Karlie, you are at the top of your career and your career is like a time sensitive kind of industry. It's like being an athlete, you know, you only have so many seasons or years where this is even a door that's open to you. And so I was very aware of that, but also knew that in my gut, I wasn't fulfilling my fullest potential as a person beyond just succeeding in a career. But as a person, I felt like I was underdeveloped and that I could be doing more to further develop these skills and beyond that, I think I was just craving being challenged intellectually. And I think those 4 years that I was in high school and balancing academics and a career, I kind of was really stimulated on both sides. And I felt like I personally was growing a lot. And I think when I fully focused just on my modeling career from, when I graduated high school in 2011 until I think it must have been 2014 or 15 when I started at NYU, I was fully focused on my career and I was loving that, but it felt one-dimensional. It felt like it was only one part of who I was. And I think when you get that gut feeling, and it's hard to even identify it, we all have our own kind of, I don't know, intuitions, and whatever that little inkling is, that those little red flags that pop up in the back of your head, or the voice inside your head that's like, something's not right. I don't know what it is, but something isn't totally right. And I had that feeling. And on paper, I had everything going for me in my career, but I just in my gut knew that there was more I needed to do for myself. And that is why I looked into options of how to kind of balance my career and my academics yet again. And NYU had this amazing program, or this school at NYU called Gallatin, School of Individualized Study. And I'd heard of a lot of other actors and dancers and people, including one mentor of mine, Christy Turlington, who applied, or who had gone to school there, and being in the heart of New York, and being able to have a job and pursue your studies was something that I was really intrigued by. So that when I had that feeling, I seeked out my options, and I pursued it, and I applied. And I was so glad that I had my SAT and ACT scores to lean back on. And I was so glad that I had left kind of a wedge in that door for myself.
The big question that comes to mind for me is, as you sort of said, like, you're one-dimensional, what were the other dimensions that you wanted to layer on? And what did you want to learn at that time, if you can think back?
One summer in August of 2014, I took a coding class, because I had met so many interesting people in the world of tech who were building big tech companies that were scaling the world and reaching many, many millions of people, and building this kind of technology and company around an idea. And this elusive sort of word kept being thrown around called coding. This idea of, oh, that person is a coder, they're an engineer, they know how to code, and that's how they're able to build all that they're building. And I just was so fascinated by what this mysterious language was of coding. So while I was waiting to hear back from NYU if I got accepted, I took a boot camp coding class at the Flatiron School in New York. And that was a really pivotal moment for me, because it opened my eyes to this whole other world of opportunity that exists for people to learn these skills, and all that you can do with being able to code and understand how you can solve big problems and build big ideas quickly using code.
So then after you took that Flatiron course, what were the sort of things that came next that made you fall even more in love with it? Because now you've got this entire organization around it. So I'm assuming that there's something in the middle that really catalyzed that.
Totally. Yeah, I think you could say I definitely got the bug. I myself was so blown away by the fact that I had never had exposure to something that was so relevant and so powerful, like coding, and I hadn't been out of school that long. And I was just kind of blown away by the fact that computer science skills were not something that I was offered. And I went to a great public school. I definitely would have self-selected into it had it been available, and it just wasn't. So I realized, I kind of took a look around, not only at the school that I was at, but also the industry at large, and really realized that there was not an equal representation of women learning these skills or in the industry. And I kind of took another look around at my social media following and realized that I had, even at that point, millions of young women following me on social media. And I wanted point them in a direction that actually could be really valuable to them.
Yep.
And offer them something real. And so about 6 months after I took a coding class, I started a scholarship called Code with Klossy.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time when I started it, it was 21 scholarships. I was underwriting these scholarships myself, and we were gonna offer them to any young woman that wanted to learn how to code.
Nice.
And I put this out on my social media to offer these scholarships, and we had thousands of applications. Wow. For those 21 spots. And all of a sudden it just hit me. I was like, wow, there are so many other young women out there like me who are nerdy and curious and understand the opportunities that could exist if they could equip themselves with these skills. And so it's, over the last 5 years, grown tremendously. And we now are in our 5th summer of running programs, and we run everything ourselves. We build curriculum, we train teachers. We have about 2,000 scholars in our camps this summer. And it's just so extraordinary to see these young women have that same sort of eye-opening experience that I had 6 years ago, and realize just the limitless potential that they have. Yep. With these skills.
That's amazing. Now that you've been doing this for so long, there's probably a lot of generations of students that are now in college, et cetera. I'm curious, like, how do you see and explain sort of the value of college to people that talk to you about that?
Totally. I think college is incredibly valuable for so many reasons. You know, I think it is not right for everyone. And again, it's like such a personal just decision, and you don't have to necessarily have a 4-year college degree to have the skill set of even to be an engineer. You know, pretty incredible. You can go to a boot camp school and be able to have career opportunities without that 4-year degree. However, I think that 4-year degree has so much value just in the sense of being able to study things that you're passionate about, or be exposed to new ways of thinking, be exposed to new kinds of people that think differently than you, that have different life experiences than you. I think it's such an important period of just personal growth. So I would say it's again, not a one-size-fits-all decision, but it is tremendously valuable. And you know, one statistic I'm really proud of is that 65% of our Code with Klossy scholars that are in college now go on to study computer science.
Wow, that's amazing.
Compared to the 3% of women nationally. So wow. It really goes to show just how pivotal kind of the Code with Klossy experience is for young women who go on to study at college.
One thing that's really interesting is just like the value of sort of an engineering degree from any college is super high, or maybe even through other programs that you mentioned before. How do you think about other majors and sort of the economic return of college and sort of like that ROI story across the board?
I think, you know, it depends on what your passions are, what your dreams are and goals are. I think a lot of people, my sisters included, went to college not totally knowing what career path they wanted to pursue, or what, you know, I have one sister who from as young as she, you know, can remember, she knew she wanted to be a veterinarian her whole life. So that was like always the one track that she was dead set on, which gives a sense of clarity that I think is really, you know, helpful. But a lot of people, and myself included, don't always have clarity necessarily in like exactly what you want to do, exactly what you want to study. And I think if you choose to go to college, it's on you to make the most of that opportunity. You know, to realize the full value of it, you have to really make sure that you immerse yourself in as much as you can, both you know, being exposed to new kinds of people. You know, I think there's tons of value in kind of getting outside your comfort zone, studying things that maybe aren't what you're dead set on, you know, doing in your life. But I think it really depends on the individual,
Yep.
of kind of what your dreams are.
And for those who are listening who, you know, let's say you're in high school right now, and maybe this is, let's pretend it's pre-COVID just to make it a bit simpler. And you're deciding, okay, do I go to college or not? Especially for people that are not of means, that are coming into it and you're gonna have to take on a lot of debt. How should they think about that calculus?
I think that there's, you know, a lot of options that exist. Like I said, you know, a boot camp, a coding boot camp, like the Flatiron School, where I learned initially how to code. I was really impressed by the just option of skills-based learning, and learning this trade that can be done in a relatively short period of time.
Yep.
In a 3 to 4 month period, you can learn you know, this trade and be able to pretty immediately get a job. So, you know, a 4-year college degree is not necessarily right for everyone. And the economic, financial just a burden of the price tag that comes along with that is something that's a serious consideration. But I do think, you know, there's so many options of online resources that are great as well. A lot of my high school classes were done on virtual courses, and this summer with Code with Klossy, we have a lot of, I mean, all of our programs have been virtual, and I have been really impressed with how high quality of a learning experience you can have in a digital virtual capacity.
Yep.
And the community that we've been able to bring together around Code with Klossy, even though our scholars are all around the world. I mean, even just this morning, Dylan, I was on a Zoom with 450 of our scholars who are in camp right now, and they were everywhere from Pakistan to the Philippines to Northern Ireland to, you know, Florida to Seattle and everywhere in between. And we just, you know, it's pretty incredible being able to have a virtual classroom setting like that. So there are so many options out there, depending on what you want to study and depending on what, you know, your time flexibility is and your budget. And, you know, for me, I love the experiences that I've been able to have at NYU. I love being on campus, which in the world of COVID right now is maybe not an option even for those students who are enrolling in full university courses. But you know, I think there's something really, really special about pursuing that experience.
So it sounds like you've had some really positive experiences with distance learning and these other types of learning models. For students that are considering that choice of whether to go back or not, given COVID, or even whether to start college given COVID, or potentially take a gap year and self-study or start a project or work at a job, how would you recommend they weigh those trade-offs and think through that?
I think, you know, it's really personal. You know, I would say you can always come back to pursuing your academics. And I think that's something that gave me real peace of mind, taking a pause and pursuing a job and pursuing my career, knowing I could always come back to pick up my studies. And I think there's something about.
For me, it was, even though I was on a track and really engaged with it, the original reason I took a semester off from Brown was I was going, okay, well, I'm really loving computer science, but do I want to be a designer? Do I want to do product? Do I want to kind of explore other areas? And I felt like I was maybe not utilizing my time there as much as I should. And that's when I took an internship. And then from there, I accidentally did not come back and started Figma instead. But I totally agree with that in terms of that pause button is there. And if you don't feel that engagement or you don't feel 100% on what you're doing, following your gut can be like a really good move.
Kudos to you for taking that risk. And I think it does require confidence to kind of take that leap of faith. It's kind of scary.
So if you don't have that confidence, like, how do you build it up if you're not if your default path is maybe school and you're going, okay, COVID, I'm not gonna get to see my friends. I'm not gonna get to be on campus. The classroom experience, is probably a little bit different, if not a lot different. I'm still paying the same price tag, but like maybe my gut says that I shouldn't be here, or I should take a different path or press pause. I don't really have the confidence to go and just do that. Like, how do you build up that confidence and sort of start having that conversation with yourself?
Well, I think two answers to that. First answer that comes to mind is, the experience we've had with Code with Klossy this summer. I have been so impressed with the community dynamic that has been able to still happen despite being virtual. So, my worst fear at the beginning of camps this summer was that we wouldn't have the magic in the classroom, that the learning experience wouldn't be as high quality, that the connections made would just be one-dimensional. And I've been so blown away by how deeply impactful even this virtual learning experience has been for our scholars. So I would say to anyone who is, going into this next school year, and the reality is some part of or all parts of your next semester or next year ahead are going to be virtual, don't write it all off yet. I think there's still so much richness that will happen in the way that it'll be transitioned online. I have been pleasantly surprised by that. I think, if there's other factors, if there are other factors of kind of the confidence piece of it that you had mentioned, I think separate from even just deciding for this semester what to do, just in general, kind of having conviction in yourself. And I'm somebody who, I just turned 28. My birthday was last week.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. I only feel now at this point in my 20s, towards the end of them, that I've gotten much better at making decisions, that I've gotten much just stronger and have conviction in and clarity in what I want, and I'm unapologetic about it. And I think that comes from knowing yourself, and that comes with time. And I think that kind of inner confidence of being able to listen to yourself, ignore the noise of what your friends think you should be doing, what your parents even might be pushing you to do or want you to do, ignoring what, society thinks you should do, just actually listening to yourself and connecting to that inner gut feeling is so important, because the answers, what's right for you. And I only feel now at this point in my 20s that I can clearly connect to that and have conviction in that. So I would say take time to really, listen to yourself. You have the right answer.
And it's also something that mirrors my experience too. But I think it's something that so many people shut down that voice, and they actually don't listen to themselves. And then they like ask, okay, well, why am I unhappy? What do you want to do?
Totally.
Yeah, but it is very tempting, I think, to follow friends and to kind of do what's socially normal, whatever that is at the time.
Yeah.
So I guess for you, as a high schooler going on to start your career, or not start, continue your career, how did you structure your time and really think about how to create structure around your weeks? Because I think that's something that a lot of people go to college for, and that's something that they really get by default, but you didn't have that. So how did you do it?
It's a great question. I think that independence, and I think that's what I mean when, that personal growth that happens in that time period of life, post high school, whether you're in college or if you are like me and are in a professional setting at a young age, I think you still have to develop these skills of independence and structure in your life, and being responsible for all facets of taking care of yourself and communicating and starting to plan for your future. You know, there's a lot of adulting that happens that in those really crucial, pivotal years, whether you choose to, you know, go into the traditional path and pursue college or university, or if you're not pursuing that path. I think surrounding yourself with people that you can learn from and grow with is vital. I mean, I have learned so much from people in my life, whether it's, I mean, friends, mentors, or my husband. You know, I met my now husband when I was 19 years old, and I learned a lot of just kind of how to think about business, how to negotiate for myself.
Yep.
And those were things that, you know, you couldn't learn in a textbook. Maybe you could have, but I learned by asking. You know, I made a lot of mistakes. Or never fail, you win or you grow. And I think that's an interesting way to frame it. That's been my outlook on, I don't know, my life to date. It has been nonlinear, my learning path, but I use every day as an opportunity to, you know, there was a point in my early 20s where, like, Dylan, I could not even like respond to emails. Like, could not, maybe could not is not the answer. I was like, not.
How do you email? I mean, it's actually quite hard at the start.
Yeah, there's so much that's kind of unspoken.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, if I'm being honest and self-reflecting, I think I was overdeveloped in certain skills. Like, I could walk into a room with people who were extremely accomplished and you know, very, very intellectual, and kind of hold my ground and have a conversation. But I was really underdeveloped in really basic things like writing a paper or writing an email, or, you know, and that was, I think, part of what drove me to want to develop those skills. And so that was, you know, not exactly what you learn at NYU, but part of the things you practice.
I think for a lot of people that are listening, you know, you're somebody who has taken the pure sort of like the A/B path of, you know, not going to school for those formative years. And so much the value that I think people have from college is social, like you're saying. How do you think about developing your social group outside of college, and sort of what were the effects that had? I'm assuming that it was not your traditional, you know, 18 to 22-year-olds you're spending time with when you were going on your modeling career and fully focused on that.
You can build a network and you can build connections no matter where you are. I think, you know, for me, I was, from the time I was 15 years old, I was in much more mature settings than the normal 15-year-old.
Yep.
You know, I was on set with adults who were double, triple my age, quadruple my age, you know, people who had been in the fashion industry or in the creative industries for many, many years. And I kind of had to hold my own and act like an adult, but also used that as an opportunity to make connections and learn from people. Even just simple things like, you know, one of my friends, she's my friend now, but she was one of the top manicurists, and she built this big flourishing business under her name. And I remember being on a Vogue shoot with her, even being 15 years old, and asking her, how did you build your business? How does the manufacturing and distribution work?
Yep.
And how did you build your brand? How did you get the financing to do that? Like, maybe I asked her more questions than I really should have. But, you know, even just understanding it through a conversation like that with, you know, my manicurist, who was also an entrepreneur and had built this multi-million-dollar business, and learning from her experiences, it really kind of painted the picture of how someone like her had gotten to where she was. And I think, you know, if you ask people questions, especially about themselves, people like talking about themselves, and people like teaching and sharing. And so I'd say take advantage of that, you know, and, you know, you can, I think there's such a value to just making connections and building bridges and building, you know, maintaining those relationships. whether it's with your peers or people, you know, you admire or you can learn from, there, it really will serve you. And some point later on in your career or in your life, you know, if you've nurtured these relationships, you can lean on them when you need them.
Yeah.
You can ask them questions when you're at a point where maybe they've experienced something similar and they can share their learning. So I'd say that is such an important part of not just the college experience, but just of life.
Yeah, I think one thing that's implicit in what you said is that it's so important to just kind of like be in the room or have access to, maybe it's a virtual room now, but have access to that experience in the first place, and then to go find those people. And, you know, it's, I think, very intimidating for some people to reach out in the first place or to put themselves in front of those folks. But if you're able to get over that mental hump, it's so rewarding over time.
Totally. I agree.
I guess for now, what are, outside of code, what are some of the intellectual passions you have, and what are the projects that you're working on outside of code, outside of modeling?
For me, I feel like we're just scratching the surface of what we can build with Code with Klossy, and continuing to reach them. Two areas actually that I really would love to learn more about, and I'm going to look into some online courses because I have a little bit of free time. I think since COVID quarantine is not, you know, changing anytime soon, is physics and psychology are two areas where I would love to really dive in and understand more. And I'm so inspired by learning about people who have built really interesting businesses. I mean, Dylan, what you've built is so impressive, but what Figma does is so impressive, and love learning about companies like yours.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. Oh, I guess before we end, if there's one piece of advice that you'd give somebody listening to this conversation, that's kind of like, you know, in college right now, what would it be?
I'm going to go back to what I had said earlier, because it really resonates so deeply with me, is that you never fail. You just win or you grow. And I think that knowing of there's no wrong answer, you cannot fail. You're just going to be better for it, or you're going to be right. You know, on the other side of it. And so I think just having kind of that confidence to follow your intuition, follow your gut instinct on what you feel like you should be pursuing or doing with your time, or, you know, pushing yourself to grow in new ways. You know, take risks. I think one thing I say to my scholars all the time is just like, you guys have infinite potential. You know, especially, we all do. I think it's not time limited. You know, it's not just for young people. We all have infinite potential, and that sounds so lofty, but I really feel it in the sense that you can do anything you set your mind to, if you work hard and if you are committed. So if there's a will, there's a way. It's a lot of lofty sayings, right?
I love it.
But I feel it. It's the truth.
I think it's the truth too. Karlie, thank you so much.
Thank you. So nice to catch up with you, Dylan.
Great to see you.